Welcome to episode 18 of the Yes You Coaching podcast. I'm your host, Anna Manning, and today we're going to be talking about how you succeed in times of change. So, when things are moving around you, when change is afoot, when plans are ahead, and you know that things are going to be changing, or whether you're right in the middle of that change at the moment, it can be a tough old time for us humans. And change is pretty constant for most people at work, but there might be specific periods where you're changing career, where you're changing role, where you're changing job. But it may just be that you're kind of going on your merry way and everything is changing around you. Maybe your department's restructuring. Maybe there's new bits of work in town, right? So whatever it is, this episode today is going to help you to think about how you can already, just by being who you are, deal really nicely and succeed in times of change. But also, I'm going to give you some strategies that you can use when you're in a period of change and when you're finding it tough. So, the reason I'm recording this episode is because I did a keynote speaking engagement, a keynote speaking gig for a particular law firm who I do some work with. And they were having an away day at the Bear Grylls Activity Centre in Birmingham, which was awesome. And I stood in front of this huge fish tank and I talked to this team about how to succeed in times of change. And it was amazing to kind of get their take on it and hear their thoughts and find out what their feelings were. And I'm going to get you, as we go through this episode, to really think about this for you. So, first things first, you might not know this, but you are already amazingly well programmed to deal with change. And you're well programmed to deal with it in three particular ways. The first makes change safe, but tricky. The first way that you're perfectly programmed to succeed in times of change is that you have an inbuilt warning and response system, which is designed to continuously scan your environment, look out for elements of like risk or danger, and warn you. And that you might have heard referred to as your fight or flight response. And you're going to notice this in two places. The first is in your body. So you might know this one. You're going for an interview and you're sweating, your palms are cold, your face is clammy. Some people go pale, some people go red, your pupils will dilate, and you feel that like surge of anxiety. Now, when that's happening, your body is physiologically preparing you to deal with a risk, a physical danger, basically, in your environment. It's getting ready for you to be able to run really fast away from the danger or to turn and be able to fight it. Okay, it's not that useful in a work context because most of the time you don't have to fight anything or run away, but you're still going to have this fight or flight response popping up. And it's not just in response to physical danger. Your brain might scan the environment and see that you've got to do something for the first time in front of people. And it's like, danger, danger, you may be exposed here. This may be really difficult. So you get the same physiological fight or flight response. You also might notice this in your mind. So if you're going through a time of change, you are going to notice that little voice in your brain popping up all the time, saying things that might sound something like, oh my God, you've never done this before. Are you sure? Like, are you going to sound stupid if you ask that question? Maybe everyone else knows what's going on and it's just you that doesn't have a clue. You better get this perfect, right? You're going to hear that chatting voice in your mind. And all of that is part of this warning and response system. It's trying to keep you safe and away from danger during times which are unpredictable or where there's risk. So brilliantly programmed to deal with change where there's always going to be the risk of unknown stuff, danger, like your brain and your body are perfectly primed to respond to that. However, potentially going to make it a little bit tricky for you. So we're going to talk later about how you can manage that when it shows up. But the second way that you're perfectly primed to succeed in times of change is you have what we call a prefrontal cortex. And if you put your hand over the front of your forehead, that is where your prefrontal cortex lives. And in that is housed the brain processes that allow you to mentally kind of play with ideas, to think of a future which is different than the one you're currently in, and then to navigate your way towards it. So it allows you to plan, it allows you to strategize, it allows you to play with what might happen and then course correct if it does or if it doesn't. And it allows you to regulate your emotion while you're doing all of that. Now, animals can't do this. Kids can't even do it, right? If you have a kid and they can't think about the fact that they might need a coat later when it gets cold and you can, that's because your executive function's more developed than theirs. But these executive functions allow you, and you already have them, they allow you to be able to see a new future and to be able to work your way towards it. That is already inbuilt without you having to do anything. The third way which you're perfectly programmed to succeed and deal with change is what we call the concept of neuroplasticity. And basically, this means that your brain has the ability to change and rewire itself over time. So back in the day, they used to think that past childhood, you didn't really, your brain was kind of fixed and it didn't change. And they now know that that just isn't true, that your brain is constantly rewiring throughout life. So if you've ever changed a habit or changed the way you think about something or the way you do things, or you've picked up a new skill, that is neuroplasticity in action. And you might have to focus on something. You might have to put in some effort. You might have to do something a few times. But while you're doing that, your brain will literally be rewiring itself. It will be carving a new pathway. And the more you do the new thing, the more the pathway gets carved and the easier it is for you to use it. So not only do you have an inbuilt warning and response system to look at danger in times of change, you have the executive functions that mean you can look into the future, plan, strategize, and move your way towards it, all the while your brain is picking up new habits, new skills, and actually physically rewiring itself to help you to do that. So, something that I want to help you to kind of think about as you're going through some change is that you're going to have certain thoughts and feelings about whatever is changing. And it might be that you're thinking, ooh, this is interesting. This could be a good development. And when you're thinking that, you're going to be feeling something like curious or excited or hopeful. But you might be thinking, oh God, here we go again. Or this sounds terrible. And those kind of thoughts are going to prompt a completely different kind of feeling. And that feeling might be something more like fear or dread. So it's good to know, what is it around the change that you're facing or the changes that you're facing? What is it you're thinking and how is it that you're feeling? And the reason that this is really important is because those thoughts and feelings are going to influence what action you take or don't take. And that's going to influence the results that you get. So you want to be able to step back for a second and be like, what do I think about this change? And how do I feel about it? And how is that impacting what I'm doing? So when I show up at work and I'm thinking, this change sounds terrible and I'm feeling dread, how does that play out? What does that look like in my day? What does it look like in terms of how I engage with new opportunities? How I engage with colleagues? You really want to be clear on that, because you might be getting a result that you really don't want, but all of it's being driven from your thinking and from your feelings. So good to know at least what they are. And I spoke about executive functions earlier, but you've got this pretty cool executive function called metacognition, which is basically a fancy way of saying that you have the ability to observe your own behavior, your own feelings, your own thoughts, the stuff that you are doing. So you're not just at the effect of it and in the middle of it, you're able to take a step outside that and be like, what's actually going on here? How am I thinking? How am I feeling? How am I relating to this change? Like, what does that look like in my day to day? Most little kids can't do it. Your dog definitely can't do it, but you can. So I'm going to encourage you to think about it. If you're going through a period of change right now, what is it you're thinking about that change? What are the sentences that appear in your mind? This isn't about controlling them. It's just about knowing and like noticing, what am I thinking about this? How am I feeling? Good to know. And if you're thinking and feeling stuff that's making it tricky or that's making it difficult, or you hit a part of the change where you're struggling, I'm going to share like 5 things with you that I think will help you during a period of change. And the first one is know what support you need during a time of change. So, what is it that would really help you to succeed? What approach would somebody take with you that would allow you to have a smooth transition into something, that would allow you to try something out for the first time and maybe not get it perfect? When I asked this of the group that I was talking to yesterday, they said things like someone who could be compassionate, someone who was understanding, someone who was empathetic, someone who could kind of understand that maybe I was going to make some mistakes and be able, we could actually learn from that rather than beating me up. And you might be thinking something similar. But are you doing that for yourself? Are you understanding when you make a mistake? Or do you ruminate about it for ages and beat yourself up? Are you compassionate with yourself because you're going through a period of change? Or do you push your emotion down and tell yourself you should just be able to get over it and power through? Are you understanding when you find things a bit more difficult than you normally would? Or do you get frustrated with yourself? Most of us instinctively know how we want people to be with us, but we're pretty terrible at being that way with ourselves. So if you're going through a period of change, I'm going to recommend quite strongly that if you know what you would need to support you, you also need that from yourself. Work out, write down, let this be your mantra. This is how I need supporting during a time of change, and make sure you're doing that for yourself. Set that standard, make an actual decision and be like, right, Anna, from here on out, we're going to be understanding when I fuck things up that I've done for the first time. I'm not going to beat you up if you make a mistake. I'm going to pat you on the back and encourage you when you give it your best shot. I think this is one of the very best things that you can do during a time of change, and you can do it for yourself. You're the one that's going to be there 24 hours a day. You could be your biggest supporter during this time of change, and that's not to say that you might not need support from other places. You will. But how could you give it to yourself? I used to be I just used to support myself in a really poor way. If I'd have managed other people like I manage myself, they'd have raised grievances, they'd have left, they'd have asked for me to get sacked because essentially I was like a horrible bully to myself. Not anymore. And I can tell you, I've been through some massive changes in the last few years, and that's what's enabled me to do it. I've like had my own back. I've known that I'm not going to beat myself up and talk myself down and just generally be really shit to myself. Even when I do get stuff wrong, and I do, of course, we all do. So where could you give yourself a bit more understanding, a bit more compassion, a bit more empathy, a bit more support, a bit more encouragement? Do that. Honestly, it's the biggest thing you're going to do for yourself in a period of change. The second thing is to try using a growth mindset. So this term, growth mindset, fixed mindset, comes from the work of Carol Dweck, who's an American academic, and her team were studying the behavior of learners, of kids in school, and they became interested in some behaviors around failure. So they noticed that some kids were able to rebound after failure, meet those challenges and carry on, and that some kids were seemingly devastated by even like really small setbacks. And they became interested in this, and they looked at the underlying kind of beliefs of both of those groups of kids. And what they saw was that the group who were able to rebound after failures and keep going, not only did they achieve more, but they did it because they had this underlying belief that their skills and abilities could improve. It wasn't like I'm either good at this or I'm not. It was like, well, I failed, but if I keep going, I'll definitely improve. And guess what? Because that was their underlying belief and that was their mindset, they did. So they coined that term, those kids had a growth mindset. A fixed mindset, on the other hand, and this was the kids who came across a failure or a challenge and it set them back so much. They achieved less overall. And their underlying belief was like, I'm either good or I'm not, or I just can't, I'm just crap at it, I just can't do it. And I gave the example that I have a really fixed mindset around maths, or I certainly did when I was a kid. I was like, I'm just crap at maths. I always used to say that. And guess what? It was really difficult for me to get better at maths when my mindset was that I was crap at maths. When we're doing new things, when we're going through a period of change, there's always going to be stuff that we haven't done before. There's always going to be setbacks, challenges, stuff that don't go right. And if you're devastated by little setbacks, how well are you going to succeed in a time of change? Probably not that well. But if you're able to meet those failures and those setbacks and those challenges, and yes, it's still going to hurt, but you're able to dig in and carry on, you're going to come through that period of change. So if you're able to use that growth mindset, it's definitely going to help. Now, a word on perfectionism here. Perfectionists can have very fixed mindsets. So if you identify as a perfectionist, new challenges and new things and periods of change are going to be really hard for you because you don't want to do stuff unless you can get it perfect first time. How the hell can you get it perfect first time when you've never done it before? So be aware, if you're a perfectionist, you may find times of change specifically difficult and challenging. There's an episode, if you look back in the episodes about perfectionism, really dig into that. But also just think, am I using a fixed mindset? And is there any way I could try and develop a growth mindset to help me through this change? Number 3 is, sorry, I need to take a sip of that water there, and I never edit these podcasts. What is your why? Think about why you have to do this change. Why is this change happening? Because believe me, your brain is going to tell you why you shouldn't. When you hit a stumbling block, when things get tough, your brain's going to be like, oh, what the hell am I doing this for anyway? This is a total waste of time. This is stupid. We should just go back to the way that we did things before. Right? Your brain's going to do that automatically. You are not going to have to think about it. You are going to have to actively think about why you actually are doing something. And I said to this group that I was talking to yesterday, your why might only be that your boss told you you need to and you like getting paid at the end of the month. If that's the only why you've got, remind yourself of that. It's a great thing to be paid at the end of the month. But your why might be a bit deeper than that. Think behind it. Why is it important that this change is happening? Why is it important that you give something a go? Who stands to benefit ultimately? Like, who do you serve? And who benefits from this change? remind yourself on purpose, why are you doing the damn thing in the first place? Because believe me, if you don't, your brain is going to forget. All right, number 4. I've got a couple of what am I calling them? Self-coaching strategies. The first one's a self-coaching strategy. It's like this is like self-help basically for going through periods of change. And the first one is to use what I call the ARS method. And this is for a moment where you hit something tricky, you hit something challenging, and you could really do with a little coach in your back pocket to just be there with you and G you up and encourage you and spur you on. So, for instance, say you're sat at your desk and you really should be getting on with this paper, but you just can't seem to do it. You can use the ARS method in times like that. And ARS is an acronym. So it stands for A, acknowledge the feeling, like how are you feeling? R, remind yourself why you're doing the damn thing in the first place. And S and E, support and encourage yourself. So if you're sat at the desk and you're like, oh my God, I just can't do this. Here's how the ARS method might sound. Okay, what am I feeling? I'm feeling despondent. Right. So you're acknowledging that. Then I remind myself, why is it I want to do this paper? It's like, well, I have got something interesting that I want to share here, and I've been asked to do it, and I said that I would, and it's important to me that I keep that commitment. Okay. Then I give myself support and encouragement. Come on, Anna, you can do this. You've done loads of papers before, and think about that last one that you made a really good success of. You're going to nail it. Come on. Just do me 10 minutes. So there you go. ARSE. Use your arse when you hit a tricky moment. Basically, it's like a little bit of really fast self-coaching that once you're practiced at it, you can do in like 5 seconds. The next thing, I didn't call that self-coaching strategy, did I? I called it something like that. This is, think about a time when you've felt that fear response, you felt that stress response rise up in you at work. And this definitely is going to happen during a period of change because things are changing, things are different, things are maybe more unpredictable. So you're going to notice that fight or flight response that we talked about earlier. You're going to notice that stress response get triggered. And that's fine. But that process is supposed to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So you get triggered, your body gets everything it needs to respond to it, and then you're meant to come back down to a state where you're kind of calm again, where you're re-regulated. But what can happen is you get stuck right in the middle of it, and you stay in a kind of state of fear, of stress. And this happens all the time at work. So I'm going to share with you 6 ways that you can complete that stress cycle. So the body has got those chemicals, the stress response is up. Then what can you do to kind of bring yourself back down into a normal state? And what I would normally do is drink some tea and eat some biscuits, but not necessarily the most effective thing that you could do. So what else can you do when you notice that stress response has been triggered and you want to kind of calm back down to an equilibrium so that you can use your brain again and get on with what it is you need to be doing? The first thing is you need to move. So you want to get up, move your body around, do star jumps, whatever, but you need to move. Dance, jog. It doesn't even have to be fancy. Just run up and down the stairs a few times. That is backed by the research, proven to kind of bring you back into that calmer state. The next thing is to create or to make something. So what have you got around to hand that you could make or do? Pick up some knitting and do a few lines. Could you play with some of your kids' toys? Could you make some Legos? Could you draw a picture? Could you do some doodling? Right? There is a million things that you could do. Keep stuff on hand and do it. The next thing is laugh. So put a comedy video on, phone up your mate who's lols, be like, have you got some jokes for me? The next thing is cry. So we're like, oh, crying has no place in the workplace. And you might think, okay, I don't want to cry in front of people. Fine. Go and have a cry in the comfort of your own room. Go and have a cry in the toilet. Crying is scientifically proven to release that emotional stress. It is a release. So, if you need to, have a good cry. The next one is hug someone or something. So, this could be a person or a pet, but the research says that you should have a 20-second hug, and that releases oxytocin. It brings your stress level down, and it completes that stress cycle. The next thing is do some deep breathing. So, maybe you go in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, and just do that a few times. Let your belly go nice and soft as you do it. So when you're in that stress cycle, you might notice that your abdomen is pulled in and you're breathing right up in the top of your chest. So you want to, on purpose, let your belly just go really, really, really soft. And if you think, am I breathing deeply or not? Open your mouth and stick out your tongue and then breathe in, and you will find the breath automatically goes into the bottom of your abdomen, which might feel strange because we don't generally breathe like that. But yeah, when it gets emotional and when you're feeling that stress thing happening, move, create and play, laugh, cry, hug someone, or do some deep breathing. The 5th strategy that I want to share with you is around being honest. So times of change are going to bring up, like we've said, all kinds of thoughts and all kinds of feelings. And it's sometimes difficult to be honest, isn't it, in professional environments, because everybody's walking around pretending that everything's fine and we're all behind this very professional facade. But that can be quite a lonely place. And imagine if everyone's walking around pretending. There's all this stuff going on the inside, and on the outside, everyone's just pretending to be fine. Ugh. When I see people successfully navigating change, they are able to notice what's going on for them, and then they're able to be out with it and to say it. And this might not be to your boss, and it might not be to your work colleagues. It might be to someone at home. It might be to a lamppost. But it feels nice to be honest and to say it and to admit it. It acknowledges who you are and where you are and how you're feeling. I know that our workplaces maybe are more honest than they used to be. And I hope that one day we'll all have workplaces where we can be really honest with each other when things are good and when things aren't so good. And we'll know how to support ourselves through that and how to support each other. I think that might be a distant dream, but I think if you can be honest as much as you can, it will help you to succeed during a time of change. So remember, by how your brain and your body are wired, you are programmed to succeed at change. It's what humans have been doing for how long? Think about the things that humans have done. Built civilizations, explored space, made the Kardashians. Change is a constant. I know that's a trite thing to say, but also think about the change in your life. When has it ever been the same? You've never been the same age for more than a year. And think about your career. I bet this isn't the first job you've ever had. You've had to learn loads of stuff. You've had to do so many things for the first time. You can do that. You're perfectly primed and programmed to do it. And yes, sometimes it's going to be scary. Sometimes it's going to be hard. And sometimes you're going to have loads of really uncomfortable thoughts and feelings around it. But come back to these strategies that I've taught you today. And you can succeed in times of change. Last thing, I've got an invitation for you. I'm inviting you to come and join the SU coaching community. And the reason that I'm inviting you is because this is a place for building confidence. Not the kind of foo-foo bullshit, like act like Beyonce confidence, but actually inside confidence and calm that enables you to do and say and be who and what you want to be at work. And every Sunday, I send out a coaching email that lands in your inbox to like prep you for a confident week ahead. I love people being in that community, and I'm inviting you. Come and join us. The link's in the show notes. You can join in just a few taps. See you in the next episode.